Liar. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is February 3rd, Monday, February 3rd, 2025, and this is Elon Musk, and I have taken over the Kagro in the Morning Show, and I don't have a South African accent anymore, so that's great. Good news for those of you who just can't stand the South African accent, I guess. And, I don't know, maybe all of that is true. Who knows? What a weekend. As you know, Donald Trump, just like last time, has eliminated the weekend. There's no resting here. We should probably switch and take, like, I don't know, Wednesday, Thursday off as a weekend here, and then cover Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday and Tuesday as well. Sometimes I take a long weekend, play some golf, and ruin the government. So lots to catch up on as usual. And as usual, the play is to create too much for us to catch up on, and there's no possible way to cover it all. I gather that the thing that people will be chatting about, the thing that's risen to the top of the flood of, I don't know, information illegality, just plain power plays, etc. You'd think we'd be talking tariffs. I think going into the weekend, the big threat was that Donald Trump, and this changed over the weekend 7, 8, 9 times, Donald Trump was ready to impose his 25% tariffs on both Canada and Mexico, and some 10% tariffs on China as well. And then, I don't know, the bulk of the weekend was kind of like, well, okay, it's definitely starting February 1st. February 1st rolls around. Well, then it moved to February 18th. Somebody said, no, February 18th, that's when we're going to do it, which struck me as hilarious because I was, well, that's about 2 weeks is what you're saying. So you're saying they're never going to come. Then they got moved back again. So now I think the go date on this is tomorrow for some reason, February 4th, which I guess is about, I don't know, maybe Trump wanted to stay in Mar-a-Lago an extra day and play some more golf and then come back Tuesday, or he wanted to wait for the Republicans to get back in town, the congressional Republicans to get back in town and have a press conference with them. I don't know why Tuesday would be go day for anything in particular. Honestly, we should all get home. We should get Tuesday off to recover from Mondays. So anyway, big tariff war sparked over the weekend. Retaliatory tariffs being proposed by both Mexico and Canada. I assume China probably has some ideas about that too, although they are taking a slightly different tack on it. So interesting that Canada and Mexico go to retaliatory tariffs. A little choice, but to do that. And China is apparently, I think their main mode of opposition is to sue the United States in the World Trade Organization courts. So that's interesting. Somebody, thought to try and utilize that international organization. I'm sure Donald Trump will just, reject the legitimacy of the World Trade Organization. But whatever, you got to try that. At any rate, so that was going on. The Canadians got a talking to from Justin Trudeau in 2 languages, as they often do up there in Canada. Beautiful French, can't understand any of it. A couple of cognates that stick out. It's very interesting to hear them do press conferences, just freely moving back and forth between. But sort of a war footing that they're taking there. It had a very weird feel to it. I mean, right now it's just a trade war, but I guess he's really stealing the Canadians for a clean break with their closest ally and the person, the country with whom they share the longest, so mostly unsecured border. Reaction in Canada, in addition to the retaliatory tariffs, a lot of American products now being either boycotted, or in the case of the liquor control boards in Ontario are removing American products from the shelves of the state liquor stores there, which is a pretty serious thing, And in fact, I understand that they're making an effort there in Ontario under Doug Ford, who, remember, used to be crazy and possibly semi-Trumpy. And I mean, I guess that's the difficulty of creating Trumpy regimes around the world, either at the national level or at the state level, where they have that kind of autonomy. The problem with that is they're likely to get huffy and stand up to you if you cross them where you could be making allies. But that's not Trump's game. Anyway, in Ontario, I guess there's specific Ontario, and I read British Columbia. Maybe one, maybe the other, maybe both. I don't know. But apparently also attempting to sort of target red state products. I don't know how easy it is to really do that. And of course, the integration of the economy being what it is, who knows who gets hurt on some of these things. But trying to target red state products, which, makes a facial, some sense facially. But of course, most of the people who work at in the endeavor of manufacturing those things are likely parts of the forgotten blue pockets of some of these red states. It's quite a show. We'll see how they sort this stuff out. But then, as it turns out, that didn't end up being the story of the weekend, because the late weekend was dominated by Tina Peters breaking out of prison in Colorado, or at least her ideas breaking out of prison. She's sitting in jail in Colorado for having leveraged her government position to break into secure facilities in Colorado, of course, as the elections official, and bring in her team of forensic hackers and tear the place apart and steal the software of the machines and try and essentially mount an electronic takeover of the election system in her county. She's now in prison for 9 years. Meanwhile, same crime committed over the weekend by Elon Musk and the best I can tell you is a cadre of teenagers that he found at summer camp or something. People who were interning at his various companies or at Peter Thiel companies. And that was the big story of the weekend. Wired magazine reporting that some gang of 6 kids from age 19 through 24 or so had essentially walked in under cover of the Doge non-governmental entity thing. And I don't really know why guards let them in, but they did. And in the case of some of these things, there are now confirmed cabinet level secretaries who are in charge of those, and I guess they could issue the permission. But it started at OPM and OMB. We heard about that last week. This weekend, it moved to USAID. U.S. was an agency for international development, a semi-autonomous agency, somewhat affiliated but not entirely controlled by, or not at all controlled by, I guess, the State Department. But it's a foreign aid operation. And once again, moving in with their own servers, unplugging what was there, hacking the system, locking out the actual leadership of the agency, and spoofing emails that look like they come from some main office at USAID, and telling 10,000 employees that they've all been laid off, don't come to the office anymore, locking out the bosses who would ordinarily send panicked emails to everybody saying, we've been hacked, ignore that email, and alleging that along with hacking, same at the Treasury building, and simply using the computers to erase and turn off electronic payments from the Treasury to people who have rendered services or have contracts or have refunds coming to them or are supposed to be collecting Social Security, downloading the entire databases that are available to them. Again, something that put Tina Peters in jail. She must be wondering why they're able to get away with this, but she's in on state charges, you see. So it's been kind of a wild weekend. Greg Dworkin has been watching it. I'm sure you're astonished, too. I think I've set the table for us here, and now we can go to town.
Good morning.
Greg.
Hard to be astonished when you sort of expected this. Tim Miller also reports,
well, I like
haven't
being
seen
astonished.
This spread around, but rural.gov is down. That's a portal that helps rural people build economic development through job creation, infrastructure development, and community improvement. Guess the billionaire coastal elite running Doge don't see the value.
Yeah, I guess not. And boohoo, something, leopards.
Well, that's the thing. You have to make that just clearly known. And there's an important point about that HuffPost made.
Yes.
This is about the tariffs. Fox News stings Trump with all too honest look at the true toll of his tariffs. The right-wing network couldn't sugarcoat this one for the president. Viewers were given an unexpectedly honest look at the potential toll on Saturday and how the decision may impact them personally by increasing the cost of household staples. As Fox News anchor John Scott interviewed Nancy Mace, some 24 products and companies flashed across the screen, from everyday items such as maple syrup, it's everyday in New England, ground beef and strawberries, to big-ticket purchases such as vehicles. Every sector of the American economy potentially could be targeted by these tariffs, and the tariffs that Mexico and Canada have now announced that they will institute against U.S. goods. So it's good that the Fox News folks are hearing it. Let's go big picture first, though. This is Sarah Longwell writing. In 2 weeks, Trump has released the J6 prisoners who violently assaulted cops, started a trade war with allies, gave China a light touch, turned over the entire government to the unelected billionaire who ruined this platform, including the Treasury payment system. This is on Twitter. Nominated the most unqualified cabinet in modern history, several of whom are actual national security risks, blamed a horrific crash on DEI without any evidence. It turns out that the pilot was Puerto Rican background, so I think that's where that came from. Added of the
they actually found something. I thought they just made the accusation and figured they'd find something
added
later.
Billions to his personal wealth by launching a scam crypto meme, purged the FBI of anybody who worked on the J6 investigations, randomly wasted a bunch of water in California, and nearly flooded out farmers just so he could act like he was turning on water for the state. And I probably missed some stuff. So,
well, that's the nature of any given day in this administration.
And for that reason, we rely a lot on Blue Sky and Twitter and other social media sites because it's just really hard for the mainstream press with its writing and editing and vetting to keep up. At least, with daily news. But they're good at some things.
That's the design.
Let me give you an example.
All right.
Stock market today. Dow futures slammed by 600 points after Trump hits Canada, Mexico, and China with tariffs. It was 500 last time I looked. Now it's 622. I should refresh it and see where we're at now.
10 billion.
622. So the markets are likely to fall.
Musk turned it off.
And that's important because, as J.V. Last points out over at the Bulwark, markets and money are the only thing that actually Republicans pay attention to. So that's why all the Republicans are quiet about it. People like Greg Abbott, Texas has an incredible amount of trade with Mexico. And he's cheering this on. And I can't imagine how this is going to help him politically.
I don't know. I did see an interesting note about Greg Abbott this morning.
When his constituents actually realize what he did, what they did, what he's cheering on, I just don't get it.
Well, who knows? And it'll be a mixed reaction. There'll be certainly some people who say, hey, I didn't vote for this. And there'll be all others who say, I love pain. If Trump wants me to have it, I love it.
Well, there's another aspect.
There'll definitely be a mix.
And we're going to go into a little bit of that. Martina Stevis-Gridneff is a
Are you okay?
reporter
what?
Who just moved to Canada and writes, as a newcomer here and a correspondent covering Canada, there's a remarkable national focus underpinned by a sense of shock and betrayal. And
okay, I see that. I have seen that. That is. But I haven't seen her.
And Brian Stelter noted, I highly recommend checking out Canadian news coverage of the trade war. The tariffs are even bigger news in Toronto, Montreal, Ottawa, and Vancouver than they are in New York and D.C., where it's like one of 5 or 6 stories, as you pointed out. The real story is Elon Musk. The real story is this, that. In Canada, it's no.
I mean, they are real stories.
The trade war.
But I definitely do recommend, this will bring you back, some of you, if you're old enough, to early Iraq War days. CBC might be the place to look for real news.
The biggest paper in Canada is the Toronto Star, but it's very
gigantic.
The Globe and Mail is a smaller paper, but actually has more funky coverage, so I've been looking at that.
No.
And this one is interesting, and I think it's important because I said there's something other than I like pain or I don't believe he's going to do it. There's also a part that says, no, we know exactly what we're doing. We're doing this on purpose. It does have a purpose. Our purpose is to make the dollar stronger. I read this analysis and I thought to myself, shades of the Laffer curve. You have these guys who really think this is going to happen. I mean, the dollar may in fact get stronger, but that doesn't mean that it's going to make up in purchasing power for everything that the tariffs that are retaliatory put on.
Possibly not. I don't know if I've heard that one, but I have seen economist Justin Wolfers having a field day over the week, a field weekend, just appearing on television talk shows and answering this garbage with, no, this is how
You're
economics
in my wheelhouse.
works.
Thank you so much.
You're wrong.
You know, so
yeah,
how
he's
are
done a
we
great job.
befuddled at U.S. tariffs when it's all been so obvious, writes John Turley Ewart for the Globe and Mail.
Oh, okay. John Turley. What?
Turley-Ewart.
Okay, different one. Good. Okay. Ewok.
Ewok, yes.
Excellent.
When this period in
That's
our
how
country's history is written,
never
Canada's
read it.
initial response, shock, talk, and awe for tit-for-tat, retaliatory rules, will measure the complacency with which we have managed trade relations. Our leaders were blind to the dynamics driving the efforts by many Americans to upend this global trading system. To paraphrase James Carville, it's their economy, stupid. Why this administration applauds tariffs shouldn't be a secret. U.S. President Donald Trump's chief economist, Stephen Miran, a Harvard-trained PhD and hedge fund strategist, nominated to chair the President's Council of Economic Advisors. Didn't Wolfers have that position at some point? Can't remember.
Maybe.
Can't remember which one had what.
He's a very important
which
dude.
Justin, which Jared, which this, which that. I can't remember.
All right.
Justin Wolfers, that's the guy with the long hair.
Oh, look. Yes.
As opposed to Jared, who doesn't. Anyway,
Right.
he wrote in November a user's guide to restructuring the global trading system. He asserts that, quote, the deep unhappiness with the prevailing economic order is noted in persistent overvaluation of the U.S. dollar and asymmetric trade conditions. Overvaluation makes U.S. exports less competitive, U.S. imports cheaper, and handicaps American manufacturing. For Mr. Miran, tariffs can mitigate the consequences of the U.S. dollar's reserve currency status and the openness of U.S. markets. To be sure, tariffs, see, the openness of the U.S. markets means millions of job losses among the working class. So to be sure, tariffs would likely see the value of our dollar, which is to say Canadian, versus the U.S. dollar, the loonie.
Yes.
The
Right.
Canadian
No, really,
coin,
that's the name.
$1 coin, gold coin with a loon on it.
Yes.
The loonie. To be
John
sure,
Ford.
tariffs would likely see the value of the Canadian dollar versus U.S. dollar drop. And it did briefly so far in the market, but right now it's back up to where it was. As more expensive Canadian exports result in lower demand, this makes the greenback even more overvalued, exacerbating the problem Mr. Miran sees in the first place. And ultimately, tariffs would bring inflation, Canadian leaders say, and American consumers will revolt. But Mr. Miran's answer to that is twofold. He would introduce reduced U.S. corporate taxation, which you can't do without Congress, extensive deregulation, and that would support U.S. exports despite higher U.S. dollar. See, all you have to do is free up the manufacturers like Elon Musk, and everything will be cheaper. That's his view. In other words, this is deliberate because that is his view. And in his view, the higher U.S. dollar would give American consumers the additional purchasing power to absorb some of the tariff costs without stoking too much U.S. inflation. And so the reason I bring this up is that sometimes you look at somebody who does something really stupid, really, really, really stupid, and you say, how could you do something so stupid? And they say, it isn't a mistake. This isn't Pee Wee Herman, I meant to do that. This is, I meant to do that because I have an idea behind this. See, if I do this, then this other thing will happen, and it'll turn out to be all good. And other folks looking at this and say, listen, you simplistic twit, that's not how it works.
Yeah, and he may have said to it because Justin Wolfers is Australian.
Good.
As it
Possibly,
turns out.
yes, he is.
So,
he's very Australian.
Yeah, and he's very Australian. I don't think it doesn't look to me like he held any governmental position here. He's just an all-around smart economist guy who goes on TV a lot. Okay, but he's done a terrific job deflating this, and just he's doing interviews from his from his place. Yeah, and the anchors who bring them on are saying, well, you see, this is the way they explain it over. The new guy at the Council of Economic Advisors says if they strengthen the dollar, it offsets the situation with the tariffs. Does that make sense? And he says, no. Let me take you through the economics 101 of it. And blah, blah, blah. So he goes and does it. I saw another great interview with him over the weekend where, again, these bizarre assumptions just swallowed by the anchors. They're like, but if everybody's taxes go down, then won't that offset it? And he says, what taxes going down? Have you seen a plan to lower taxes? No, but eventually that probably will come around. Well, it hasn't, and it still needs to pass Congress. And they said, well, that's the idea. And then eventually everybody, if your paycheck goes up, then you can.
And I'll just get into the system and make it happen without Congress.
Sure. I guess he can go ahead and do that now. And, well, when everybody's paycheck rises, then what paycheck rises? I'm not getting a raise. Are you getting a raise? Why do you think people are getting raises?
So let me give you this is the flavor of the depth of thought and deep research that's gone into the reaction to this. This is Jack Mladen, who is apparently a Christian nationalist.
Ooh, not Jack
and
Bin
wrote,
Laden.
had Canada been treating us fairly, this never would have happened. So buckle up, Canada. You're taking on Goliath. And a community note added says, Goliath, the giant champion of the Philistines, was killed by a single stone shot from the sling of David, who then cut off Goliath's head with his own sword. I hope this was helpful. Source, 1 Samuel 17,
How did that work
Old
out?
Testament, the Bible. It's absolutely hysterical. But yeah, that's the depth of it. Oh, yeah, we're going to win. We're going to crush those guys. We're so much bigger and stronger than them. That's your only reaction? Well, yeah, MAGA. That's why I elected this guy to do stuff
Goliath.
like that. Yeah, but what about the consequences?
He was thinking of the
what
dog.
Consequences? How could there possibly? Oh, look at the market today. It's 9:22, by the way. Market opens at 9:30. We'll see what happens.
First, okay. Well, we'll be in break. Yeah. Well, you can turn on Financial News Network during the break.
I suppose I could, but I can't look at the screen and the TV at the same time.
All right. Well, me neither. All right. Hey, you think he was thinking of Davy and Goliath from early morning television?
Yeah, and not, I don't know.
You're taking on a claymation dog, so look out. I don't know. I think you'll lose this tariff war, Davy.
There was another piece here. Who is that disgraced crazy general who was recently?
Oh, I don't know.
The first Trump security.
Mike Flynn.
Yeah, Mike Flynn. The spy. After the convicted felon. So after Musk broke in to Treasury and got all sorts of confidential information that he wasn't supposed to have. Apparently, some of it wound up in Mike Flynn's hand.
Oh, yay.
And Flynn wrote something along the lines of, look at these so-called Lutherans being funded. That's ridiculous. They have nothing whatsoever to do with real religion. Something along those lines.
What?
And I'm thinking, okay, this is going over really, really well. It's working exactly the way they planned.
There aren't any Lutherans around. Yes, I did see something about that, and for whatever reason, they were targeting Lutheran Social Services, and I think the reason was Lutheran Social Services has a division that does refugee resettlement, and that angry immigration. So they were mad, but of course, in order to rile people up, they had to say horrible things about them, not just, hey, we disagree with resettling refugees. So now Lutheranism isn't a real religion, and you're going to be defunded. Apparently, also, Lutheran Social Services, one of the largest employers in the state of South Dakota, where their governor has taken off to cosplay as DHS Barbie for the past couple of weeks. And I gather they have a new governor, but, whatever. Leopards will be feasting on the economy of South Dakota as well. As a result of this. But yeah, giving Mike Flynn raw data on anything. I mean, that's why they fired him from the DIA. He was untrustworthy with raw intelligence. Now he's essentially Mike Lindelling his way out. This is the same play. This really struck me as interesting. It's the same parallel thing to the people who, under the guidance of Mike Lindell and Sidney Powell and Lynn Wood, were encouraged to break into the computer systems of controlling voting and vote counting and steal data, and then they would point to data that says X and say, look, it says Y, and swear that was somehow the truth, and then most of them got sued or arrested. And now, unfortunately, the same thing is happening except with government payment systems and administrative systems and email and communication systems, and nobody I guess we have to wait. Nobody has yet been arrested or prosecuted for any of this, but it's essentially the same thing. They're now dumping data that they don't understand and saying, aha, like this is the Twitter files of government. Right. They're just looking at data and saying crime. And it doesn't make any sense.
So in the meantime,
but here we are.
You remember how legal professors love to pontificate about how the Supreme Court will or won't do this based on prior precedent, and none of it turns out to be true because they don't really care about precedent. They're just in it for the power. So these economic professors are now looking at the tariffs and trying to figure out what's going on. And a reporter, Nick Timmerhouse, writes, there's a bull market right now in long professorial explanatory threads that include some sort of condescending, if you don't support this, you must be in favor of an unsustainable status quo. Straw man insinuation. And the chef's kiss is when they end up with them saying, of course, this isn't going to work and it's going to be bad. But you have to have some sort of explanation because my job is to take the irrational and make it rational. And it's not.
I guess. Yeah, so I guess they get to take their turn at sane washing.
Yeah, pretty much. That's exactly what it is.
Okay. Yeah, I've seen some really interesting developments around this, and it's very much like the Supreme Court stuff where you say, well, look, this is not how it's supposed to work. This is illegal if illegal means anything anymore, but yeah, we have no mechanism for handling this because, we wrote the laws and we figured, well, we don't have to safeguard against this. No one will ever do that. No one will ever just let imposters in.
Before the break, I got to get this in
secretary.
breaking. $2 billion in value liquidated from cryptocurrency.
Is that bad? I don't even know. Okay, through the basement and into the center of the earth.
Hi, I'm Scott Anderson, the guy that writes the daily summary for this show, Kagro in the Morning. Thank you to everyone that supports this show. Many of you send donations through PayPal, Patreon, Square Cash, Radio Public, and so on. Some of you write your own essays and send them in, or read articles with your own commentary. We appreciate it. Now, some of you are listening to this and thinking, I'd like to help, but isn't there something I could do that wouldn't require money or effort? Why, yes, there is. You can just like us. On Daily Kos, they call it the recommend button. YouTube has a thumbs up. There are hearts and likes and love buttons. Tap our love button. Tap our love button every day. Share our shows and summaries on Facebook and Twitter, YouTube and iTunes, Stitcher and Amazon. Most of these places allow you to write a review, so a sentence or two would be great. Recommend us to social media, or tell your friends to listen to the show. You aren't just helping us, you're helping them find their new favorite thing to listen to. You could change the world. So thank you in advance from me and everybody else in the world.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Roots Radio. The stock market crashed. All right, no, don't invest based on that. I made that up. But, futures were down. They should be, I guess, ringing the bell about now and smiling and taking pictures. It doesn't look great. Although I did see this now the things are starting to move. But I did see this morning that Josh Marshall was sort of puzzled at he thought the futures would be down further, but I guess stock traders are essentially betting. It looks like they're betting on there being a Colombia/TikTok play here, that the tariffs either won't go into effect, like at the last minute he'll announce, Canada surrendered and gave us $1 trillion, so I'm not doing it, or put them in place for a week and then say they've learned their lesson. The market hasn't really, doesn't look like they believe these things are going to be in place long term. And they might not be. Nothing is. Not in this
in other words, Trump voters.
Yeah. Well, that's true too.
Well, that's what they are.
Yeah.
They're all Trump voters. I don't really think he's going to do that.
Very little.
But we'll see.
Yeah. And I wanted to point out, by the way, some of the data theft that the Elon Musk kids have been up to over the weekend at Treasury is very usable in a sort of a Cambridge Analytica / experimental AI sort of way, that you can use that data to give you a pretty good prediction. And now of course, you can cross-reference it with, say, FEC donation information and get a pretty good idea, a pretty good AI guess at whether the individual you're looking at is a Trump voter or not a Trump voter. And, when we get to the FAFO stage of these tariffs, for instance, if he were to put the tariffs in place and ravage the economy and start a trade war and everybody got hurt, you could, in fact, launch a program of tariff relief and tell everybody, when you file your taxes, if you believe you've been hurt by tariffs, you can total the damage that you felt you take and apply for a tax rebate, and it just won't be applied equally to everyone. We'll use our AI and our stolen data to decide whether or not we think you're a Trump voter. And if we think with high confidence that you are, you'll get a rebate for your tariff impact. And if the odds are that you were a Harris voter or a non-voter, sorry, your application for a rebate has been rejected. You can sue us. See you later.
Masnick. Well, speaking of suing us, I don't understand why Democratic attorneys general aren't taking Musk immediately to court over this, as their states are affected and therefore they have stand.
Yeah. Well, that's if you're going to work in the legal system, it will take you a couple of days to actually write a suit and file it and get it correct. And you want to do it correctly.
I mean,
I got
because if you're going to do it and it takes a few days to do it, that's fine. I get that. But put them on notice that, hey, 19-year-old, you think you can do everything and be a master of the universe, and it's risk-free. You're getting targeted.
I guess. I'm wondering, maybe the D.C. Metropolitan Police Department ought to say, we had a report of a B&E here at the Reagan building. And looks like you're the guy that broke and entered.
It's got to be local level, because otherwise, Trump and Musk will just put you on administrative leave for trying to enforce the law. This is from Tech Dirt. Yes. Mike Masnick wrote it. And it's a compilation of pieces from other places to pull things together. But what he pulls together is basically what Elon's doing is trying to apply everything that he did at Twitter when he broke it to the federal government, which is a good insight. Elon's Twitter destruction playbook hits the U.S. government, and it's even more dangerous. That's why everybody is getting placed on administrative leave. That's what he did at Twitter. You can't do that.
It's a private company.
You're on leave.
Yeah, we need to run government like a business. Now, this is a business I wrecked, but, we need to run a government like a business that is declining. And, again, if Twitter goes down completely, if it was completely destroyed, people will say, dang, I like Twitter, but that's it. Although some people's livelihood was, certainly connected to it, but you'd have to find the next thing. But it's not the same thing as say, well, if the United States collapses as a viable entity, people can just sign up for a different country.
He mentions the Wired piece that you had talked about in terms of the ute of some of these people. Like, for example, one is the senior advisor to the director, a 21-year-old whose online resume touts his work for Palantir, which Peter Thiel is chair of.
Yes.
And the other, who reports directly to the person doing this, graduated high school in 2024, according to a mirrored copy of an online resume. And his high school student magazine, his jobs are camp counselor and bicycle mechanic.
Yeah. Now, I've been a camp counselor, so I am secretary of something by now. But I have not had the bicycle mechanic experience. I admit he's got that over me. I saw, and they're now looking, there's activists trying to identify these people and get pictures and personal information. I don't know how accurately they've done it, but it's been pretty interesting watching them work. And if they got the right picture of the 19-year-old kid,
there's at least this article mentions there's at
really
least one lawsuit already filed, and hopefully there's more.
Okay. Yeah. Well, lawsuits are slow in coming. You have to wait for the court to open today to get that done. I know the whole weekend. Part of the problem with the fire hose and flood the zone thing is people want immediate reaction to all those things, and they deserve them, and I understand exactly why. But if you're just sitting, if you're scrolling through social media waiting for the reaction that isn't going to come until Monday, and you're scrolling from Friday until Monday, you're going to frustrate yourself the whole time saying, why aren't they doing anything? They may very well be doing something. It's just not on social media yet. It may be that they're doing nothing. You might be entirely right, but we won't know until it gets reported. You're not reporting. You're just doom scrolling. So am I. But, understand that the real world, if somebody files a lawsuit, and file it in California, why is it going to be on your screen even before they file it? It's not.
And here's an added comment, which I think is important for all of us to understand. As liberals, as people who like to think about what we're doing,
I don't like that.
Like all those professors who were looking at the tariffs and saying, well, actually, there's some rational. You could look at the federal government and totally understand that it's not the most efficient thing in the world. And you can pick through it and find something that really ought to be done differently. And if you've had any dealings with them at all, I have. I did when I was doing the bird flu preparation work.
And that was not worth it, obviously, because there's no bird flu anymore.
I get that they really need to reform some things, and part of my part of the reason I was there, my own rationale for doing it, since I wasn't official in any way, shape, or form, paid by them or otherwise hired. But as a gadfly, I was there to tell them, you guys are doing it wrong. So I get that the government does a lot of things wrong. However, there's a way to address it, and then there's a way to address it. So this piece in Tech Dirt ends with saying, I'd be among the first to say the federal government needs massive reform, just as I thought that Twitter needed a major overhaul. But there's smart ways to do it, and then there's this, which is just utter destruction while looking over your shoulder to see if the nihilistic kids who worship me are finding it entertaining. There's a crucial lesson here about thoughtful reform versus destruction. I say this so that you restrain yourself from saying, okay, USAID got shut down. And they do some really good things. They do some wacky things. Maybe they fund NGOs a little bit too much or this or that. Stop doing that. This is not the way to approach that, and don't try to rationalize your way out of, okay, well, maybe it's not that bad. It's bad. The process of doing it is bad, and that's what you need to focus on.
It is. Yes.
It's vandalism dressed up as innovation.
Part of the reason. Well, yeah. And it's one of the reasons why the gotta run government like a business always
and unlike
rings
Twitter,
hollow.
There's no where people can move to blue sky. There's no backup government.
Right. Yeah. If you thought that the backup government for you was escaping to Canada, and the government is saying we're also going to invade that, well, that's not helpful.
Matthew Gertz is even more pointed about it. A private citizen with unfathomable wealth and deep ties to the Chinese government, as with his cronies, seized control of the government and is canceling congressionally apportioned spending based on whims. The key source of Musk's power, he seems to have the ability to put career staffers who resist him on administrative leave.
Yes, seems to.
So that's basically the summary of what's going on. None of it's good. All of it was expected. Congress is quiet because John Thune and other people don't know what to make of this, and they're afraid, so that they say nothing.
Yeah, and everybody's back in their districts for the weekend. They're just coming off of the Republican retreat.
Oh, good. Talk to people in your district
out of town.
About tariffs.
Yeah. Well, it's now's the opportunity, and they have been doing that
farmers,
all weekend,
in which case talk to them about farm workers.
Yes, I guess you can do that. Oh, by the way, so over the weekend they also settled the question of the DNC chair, which we were supposed to be paying attention to, and we kind of did.
Ben Wickler
and it was the other guy.
And Ken Martin, I guess, came in first.
Right. Not Martin O'Malley, but Ken Martin.
It wasn't Martin O'Malley. We'll see if it matters. It's important to take a step forward. I didn't think it was a step forward, not just because I was supporting Ben Wickler, but I'm not a member, as you pointed out. If you're not a member of the committee who you support, it doesn't really matter. I just thought Wickler did a fantastic job in Wisconsin. What I
He
found
did, and I guess he'll
distressing,
continue.
as I always find distressing, I don't mind protests, but I don't like stupid protests. And the Sunrise Movement spent most of the time protesting Wickler because he's too close to donors.
All right.
The DNC,
it's funny,
among other things.
Just because you can't do anything, you know? Yeah.
You know, it's associated with rounding up donors to raise money for the Democratic Party. If you have a problem with that, you have a problem with political parties, which you do, which is why you're there, which is why you're protesting.
That's true. Right.
And so I was really glad to see them get shown the door mostly.
Okay. Right. Well, you know, that's their thing, and they don't have any representation on the Democratic National Committee.
Right. And you know, another group that never protests Republicans. I just don't have time for people like this.
Well, as it turns out, I don't know anything about the guy who won, except that I have to remember it's not Martin O'Malley, although he was also running.
Martin O'Malley's also running.
Very confusing and weird.
But you know who else didn't do well? The self-help lady, Marianne Williamson.
Me. Oh, well, she needed to help herself. She couldn't do it.
She didn't win either.
So there, yeah. I have seen Ken Martin was the only other candidate that I saw anybody in my social media feed endorse, which was interesting. And he seemed to get the endorsement of some of the more serious climate activists that I've seen. So, on the one hand, you might say, well, that's good. I mean, I think climate change is a super serious issue, obviously, because it is. That's just scientific fact. And so it's good that somebody who takes it seriously would win. I don't know that that's exactly what we need to be top of the agenda, but I don't know if it is. It might just be he gave a better answer about it than Wickler did at some point. And so anyway, he's not some kind of weirdo from outer space. He's just not Ben Wickler. Okay.
No, I don't know that much about him. And I
think that Wickler's very strong candidacy has to have affected all of the other top tier candidates, and certainly the one who won knows that, okay, there's a significant portion of the committee I report to wants the kind of party building activity that he represents that has to be on my agenda, and it will be. I'm not worried about this outcome at all. It might not have been my favorite, but I wasn't watching it nearly as closely as you were. But we could have had it. It certainly could have had a disaster. There were candidates in there that didn't belong on the ballot. But what can you do? You got to just defeat them, and we did.
So the Dow Jones is now down 535 points, but it's early.
Is that a lot of points? Okay,
it's a 1.2% drop. That's actually a pretty large drop. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah. I see. All right. Well, I would buy gold, except I think that Trump is going to steal it.
Another piece of leopard eating your face party stuff comes from Ken Delanian over at NBC.
When are they going to do?
I don't know. But he writes, the FBI is full of tough-minded, hard-charging, patriotic people, mostly Republicans, who have devoted years of their lives serving in the country and placing mission over money. And now many of them feel unfairly targeted by political operatives. They're angry, and they're not going to stand for it. I don't know what that means.
Chomp, chomp, chomp. Means their faces.
That's what I thought. But, maybe they'll do more. I don't know.
It means, I think over the weekend, one of the other things that the Trump-Musk axis did was announce that they were going to first, fire some gigantic number of agents, and then two, they were conducting an agency-wide review that the promise was, and again, this is a Trump promise, so who knows, everybody who had anything to do with investigating me, Donald Trump, and the Russia hoax, or any part of my criminal activity, or January 6th, and the people who did it are all going to be fired. I'm going to fire everybody who took on any part of the January 6th investigation of low-level offenders, Proud Boys, what have you, everybody. And apparently that covers about 55% of the agency. Everybody took a piece of it because it was the biggest case the FBI has ever investigated by far. So he's saying, I'm going to fire everybody and replace them with people who will promise not to investigate our team anymore. and that's probably
so let me
pretty
ask you a
large.
process question, since I saw this come up.
All right.
And reach back in your memory and tell me off the
I
top
have
of
more
your
to say
head,
about the
or
FBI.
Google it because I can't see you, about the history of the legislative veto, which doesn't exist anymore.
Okay. The legislative veto. Oh, are we talking about
Congress
the
used
Congressional
to be
Review
able
Act?
to, veto what the president just did with tariffs, but they got rid of the legislative veto.
Oh,
what does that mean?
Yeah. Oh, I don't. Okay. Well, I'm not that familiar with it because the tariff world hasn't really been an active area of legislation for a long time because we've negotiated all these trade agreements and we're trying to drive tariffs down.
If the president takes a controversial action, then the legislature can override it. That used to be true. Well, it's no longer true. But
I guess in general, that's how I would describe what a legislative veto is. And I think it goes on a case by case basis, depending on what Congress authorizes itself to do and the way it delegates the powers. I guess it used to be the case that it was
that brought it to my attention.
That it was that we're in a situation now where Trump claims to be able to raise and lower tariffs unilaterally. That is without any approval of Congress. And I don't know. I guess at some point, I've been reading a little bit about it just in passing, just that at some point that was changed. And it was the case that Congress could raise or lower particular tariffs on its own legislatively. And I guess they've delegated the ability to do that on a regulatory level to the president. And they retain certain rights like the Congressional Review Act. If there's a federal regulatory action, they can single it out and have a vote on the floor of the House and Senate and reject it. But all right, let's see what you've sent me here. But at some point, the claim has been all along in all of this tariff discussion that a significant amount of immediate and emergency tariff power has kind of just been ceded to the presidency, with the understanding that they would be advised by the Council of Economic Advisors and the U.S. Treasury, which would presumably be populated by economists who understood, tariffs bad. We all grew up learning about Smoot-Hawley, right? So we all have that in mind. They will prevent the president, for the most part, from taking rash action. But apparently they weren't counting on this.
So this all came from a case on trying to deport somebody.
Yes.
So the Immigration Naturalization Service there's a section of a law, the Immigration and Nationality Act. Congress authorized either House of Congress to invalidate and suspend deportation rulings. And so a particular person challenged this, and the Berger court said, allowing the Congress to override that violates the Constitution. And therefore, Congress has no business telling the president what to do. Well, and therefore, the separation of powers was irrevocably changed. That's the point that's being made by the person who brought it up.
All right, I can buy that. Although it rings a bell, and I certainly did this case in law school, and I'm trying to remember exactly what was going on. But one of the things that you said was that if you mentioned either House of Congress, of course, the presentment clause would require that both houses of Congress do it. And if you're having a legislative veto by a vote of the Senate or vote of the House, that's not going to do anything. Generally speaking, I wouldn't think that would be effective, and I would have expected that to have been rejected and not affect the separation of powers. But if the entire Congress, both chambers pass something, but I guess if it's an administrative action that's been with a power that's been delegated to the executive branch by legislation, and they don't like the outcome, they might have to write into the legislation, we reserve to ourselves the right to reject it afterwards, and not invent it after the fact. So I don't know. I'll read through this during the next.
So the bottom line is that the decline of the United States
Chado.
did not, in fact, happen because of video games. They happened because of this ruling by the Burger Court, which basically said, Congress, stop sticking your nose in the president's business.
Well, there's certainly executive activity involved in making these decisions, and if you've delegated that authority to the administrative state, then you might be out of luck on that one. But there's also, I think that probably was part of the background of the Congressional Review Act that they later adopted and said, well, all right, now we will reserve to ourselves the right to single out federal executive action, regulatory action, and with a vote of both houses of Congress, and I think there may be even a
what's the penalty on
there's
that?
any sort of
Sternly worded
supermajority.
letter?
I think they can invalidate federal regulation that way, and if both houses of Congress take these resolutions up, they can.
Right. So people understand.
From the
I'm
Code
not
of
suggesting
Federal
this
Regulations.
is actually going to happen. I'm suggesting these are things that should happen.
Oh, well, you should certainly pull that CRS report out and take a look. I mean, it's a Republican majority in both houses, narrow though it may be, and of course, any of them might get bird flu at any time. But yeah, that's a tool that the Republicans love to use when there's a Democratic president, and Democrats tend to forget about when there's a Republican president, but very often when there's a Republican president, one of the two houses is also controlled by Republicans, and it's not often an option. It hasn't been very frequently.
Right. So
in its short
Jamie
existence.
Dupree brings up this. What if there's a shutdown on March 14th? Because that's where it was
there's a shutdown now.
To. And Trump just shutters agencies saying, our Congress didn't fund them, so I can do this.
Then he'd be on firmer ground provided that they don't actually come up with a CR. But given that Congress has funded these things and he's shuttering them anyway,
that's his mechanism for actually shutting these things down. Therefore, he may want to shut down. There's a whole bunch of bad news on the horizon. I'm just trying to tell you about it.
Yes. Oh, all right. Thank you. That's what the show is.
Matt Glassman, congressional guy, is the one who brought up the whole idea of separation of powers things. And he points out if there's money at USAID that isn't worth spending, and I bet there is, I'm open to the administration doing a fiscal year 26 request with cuts, but impounding money and shuttering it by fiat is pseudo-monarchy nonsense. And again, that's the short version, abbreviated version of that tech nerd piece.
Quite correct. And again, as we reminded you last week, and as people are now picking up on, and various writers reminding everybody, this is what he was impeached for the first time. Just deciding that foreign aid was stuff he didn't like, and he was going to say no.
So I'm done, but just on leaving, I should point out that Dow is now down 625 points. So even more. Yeah, that's more than it was before. Okay. Well, yeah, I imagine there'll be a downward trend today. And I meant to say also in response to your wondering about the FBI and what was going on and the various supposed heroes standing up, but there were a couple of higher level officials who haven't yet been fired, who I guess they fire all the way down, right? I want you to lay off all these agents. No. They finally get to that guy, yes, I will do it. And no, you're fired. No, you're fired. No, you're fired. Yes. But yeah, so there are a couple of new names in circulation about or high level bosses of field offices, et cetera, who said, you can't do this and I won't. I'm not firing my people. F you, come and make me. Yeah. Now that might be what ends up happening. And you make a good reminder that a lot of those people are staunch Republicans and may even be Trumpers. Who may or may not believe they're having their faces eaten. But yeah, I would only say this: while we're glad for any individual act of resistance, you should don't bet a significant amount of money
that the person who's standing up for the rights of the FBI agents is a great guy, but we can say, all right, well, that was the right thing to do. And you've practiced that with Liz Cheney.
Lauren DeJong-Schulman writes, you say they shut down USAID. I say they illegally broke into a secure facility over a weekend, hijacked sensitive data on vulnerable people and U.S. businesses, destroyed property Americans paid for, cut off resources for hungry families, and fired Americans.
Yes, that is true. And that's the right way to describe it. And I guess we're in the midst of reinventing January 6th. So maybe people are used to it.
We're also reinventing journalism because, I don't want this sane washed. That's what happened.
Right. Yeah, that is what happened, and that's what would have happened January 6th. Don't forget.
Shut down AID.
They were going to do it analog style. Yeah. If they had succeeded more in their January 6th idea, they would have broken in, grabbed the Electoral College voting certificates and swapped them for the forgeries and then said, read these instead. That's what happened at these agencies. They broke in, turned off the computers, set up spoofing.
We'll hang you.
Yeah. And they set up spoofing servers and pretended to be the agencies and told everybody that they were fired when they weren't. And by the way, as I recall, there was a thing that Republicans were very upset about that, what's her name? Hillary something or other did with setting up private servers and how it was a huge national security risk and she had to be arrested immediately. They just did that 10 times over the weekend and they love it. Can't get enough of it. That is weird, isn't it? All right. Well, the Dow Jones is now down a billion.
See ya.
So thank you for keeping up on that. And we'll see you on Wednesday when it's up 10,000 or something crazy like that.
Bargain hunt.
Yeah. Go out there. Yeah. What do they say? Buy the dip, by which they mean Eric Trump, apparently. I mean, that's what he said. He said that. No, he's not a dip.
Sell on the rumor, buy on the news. Okay. We'll see ya.
All right. Thanks, Greg. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I don't know how else to approach the weekend but to sort of maybe try to do, well, I like to promise a speed run through these articles, but I don't think it's realistic. And it's important to dig through them and find the details. Now, some of them are behind paywalls, so we can speed run through those. But, as you can imagine, with this fire hose of information, Pocket is something of a mess as well. All right, let's see. But just in rough reverse order in terms of what got parked when, that's all I can go with. Over the weekend, among the many, many things that happened, the news that the NTSB, National Transportation Safety Board, has, as they put it here in The Verge, using an interesting word, interesting verb chosen by The Verge for the headline, NTSB chooses Elon Musk's X, that's Twitter, to update the press on plane crashes. You may recall that 150 years ago, we had a plane crash right here in the nation's capital, tragically killing 60-plus passengers on a flight from Wichita, Kansas, and the 3 on board the Black Hawk helicopter that crashed. And then Donald Trump spent the end of last week and most of the weekend blaming DEI for it. Oh, I meant to say, while Greg was on, he mentioned, what's his name from Texas? Also Greg, but the governor of Texas. And why am I blanking on it? I think I'm happy about blanking on the name of the governor of Texas. But Greg Abbott, who he was mentioned earlier on, and I don't even remember in what capacity. But at any rate, probably cheerleading the tariff destruction, even though he's, shares this giant border and trade relations with Mexico via Texas. But he was also spending the weekend cheerleading, let's get rid of DEI, let's kill the DEI, this, that, and the other thing, without any serious understanding of what that might be. And someone was pointing out, well, first of all, now it's expanded to DEIA, including accessibility. Is that right? And that might have something to do with Greg Abbott and how he lives his life. You might recall that Greg Abbott is in a wheelchair, And the building in which he gave his press conference bashing DEI most recently is a place that he could only get into because of DEI and DEIA and the necessity of making government buildings accessible, handicapped accessible, etc. And of course, that's just natural. You have to help me because I have this problem, and screw everybody else, or I don't know what DEIA really is, just like everything else. I hate the woke. I hate DEIA. I hate, you name it. And they don't really know exactly what it is that they're railing against. Anyway, so we were reading about the NTSB thing and reminding everybody of the plane crash and Donald Trump trying to blame it on DEI, which I think he probably thought that's an early setup for a play where we can blame somebody. Surely there's some minority somewhere involved in all this. Piloting the plane, co-piloting the plane, piloting the helicopter, co-piloting the helicopter, whatever, in the tower, the boss of somebody in the tower. It's got to be some minority's fault. And I don't know whether they ever came up with anybody or not, but it didn't matter. They were basically saying that the entirety of the FAA and the air traffic control system is overrun by DEI hires, and that's why the service that they provide is, that much of that much lower quality, and that's why we're having crashes. Now, of course, we've just come out of, again, the 15-year period of unprecedented air travel safety, during which apparently we were overrun with DEI hires somehow. But and ironically, the moment that the Trump administration steps in and says we're going to do something about that and starts firing people, there's a crash. But in addition, to the extent that facts matter, which is zero, it turns out, but some people like to have the facts behind these things just to be able to say, aha, see, I told you he was a liar, and you're right, and you'll want that information. Yeah, overwhelmingly, FAA and air traffic control and airline pilots in general is a pretty super white profession. There's actually a significant need for increasing the diversity. If you think that there's a reason to have a diverse workforce in every sector, and there is, I know Republicans don't believe that, but there is, aviation has a very, very, very long way to go to catch up to all of this. And of course, the DEI sniping is garbage to begin with. And, yes, it's totally hypocritical, ironic, however you want to look at it, that, they just had a DEI hire for Secretary of Defense, a guy who's got, no serious high-level military credentials to speak of, being put in charge of the Pentagon because he's, on a TV show that the president likes. I mean, it's not diversity, but it's certainly, an unqualified hire, to say the very least. Anyway, the real story I wanted to get to here was the NTSB, National Transportation Safety Board, who's got a lot of work to do investigating this crash, and a lot of interest in their work among journalists who want to know, all right, I'm not blaming anybody. What happened here, though? Want to know how this crash happened. Everybody wants to know how it happened. Well, the NTSB will investigate it, but of course now the NTSB is the province of Donald Trump and Elon Musk, who've taken over the federal government. And lo and behold, they've decided that the NTSB will, in fact, investigate this. Now, they may or may not come to a scientific conclusion about it. They may be directed in how to conclude their investigation by Donald Trump and his staff. But whatever it is that they decide they're going to announce it all via Twitter. They're no longer they won't email you their press release. I don't know whether they're going to have an in-person press conference or not, but the way to get the information in printed form is only going to be that social media service that Elon Musk owns and is desperate to have people return to as people exit it in frustration with its becoming a Nazi bar. If you want to follow official word from the NTSB about what happened about that plane crash, you got to hang out with Nazis to get it. So there you go. Isn't that fantastic? I mean, there's a whole article that goes with it that explains what I guess is supposed to pass for their logic, and it's not even very long, so I suppose we could spend a moment reading that one. Emma Roth wrote this up again for The Verge. The National Transportation Safety Board will only update the press about the plane crashes in Washington, D.C. and Philadelphia. The one happened also over the weekend while we were off the air Friday traveling around. Oh, and by the way, I need to... I heard from Scott on that one that maybe I put the wrong file in Justice's hands for the live stream, but then it looks like I uploaded the right one to the podcast. So if you heard the podcast of Friday's thing, it was short by about 15 minutes. I just ran out of time. Sorry, to record things before it had to happen. It was a long weekend. And but I recorded an exit for it that it was in the podcast, and it might not have gone out on the live stream. It just sort of, I was reading a story and then I just stopped, and then that was the end of the show. So the outro music might have been missing from that. So apologies if that was the case and you were confused by it. I hadn't been snatched away by Elon's teenage lost boys, in case that worried you. But okay, yeah, so we didn't get to the Philadelphia plane crash tragedy all by itself. Not a big commercial passenger airline, but tragic circumstances in its own right. At any rate, all of these updates would not be available via email, as reported earlier by, I don't know this publication, The Desk. The agency announced on Saturday that it will use only its @NTSP_newsroom account to share news conferences or other investigative information. So even perhaps the news conferences will just be video broadcast there. NTSB later said reporters should email mediarelations@ntsb.gov for all other inquiries, claiming that it was meant to better manage the volume of emails about the two incidents. Okay, so it might not be that all communications henceforth from the NTSB will be via Twitter, just the ones about the plane crash that everybody's interested in. And then later they may change the rules and say, you know what, everything is going to go that way. And then, of course, part of the oddness of it all is that Elon Musk is anxious to drive everybody back and maintain the reason, I guess, like, for instance, the thing that still keeps Greg there, that certain news isn't available anywhere. Well, if you make the government, if you puppet control the government to announce, yes, only Twitter is where the news will be available, well, that'll make people stick around artificially and keep your service alive, I suppose. All right. Well, in fact, as short as the article is, I'm probably not going to read the rest of it, but I did learn something along the way that so far it's just going to be information about these plane crashes. It's just astonishing. Oh, you know what? I tried to back out of it and it wouldn't go. So while it's still up on the screen, I'll let you know this part here. At the same time, the U.S. Department of Defense is also removing major media outlets like NBC News, New York Times, etc. Now it's jumped out. But that was a story in its own right, too. The Defense Department is kicking out, they have a press room like the White House does, and there's permanent-ish seats assigned there to major news outlets. So NBC News, New York Times, NPR, Politico, all kicked out from their dedicated workstations in the Pentagon, according to a report from NBC. Instead, the DoD will impose an annual media rotation program, that's in quotes, that will replace the outlets with conservative-leaning ones. So who gets the seats? One America News Network, the New York Post, and Breitbart. Now, and just to create tension, it also included the HuffPost, which doesn't even have a Pentagon correspondent, apparently, but they've given them that one, and I guess now the HuffPost has to look around and say, we're not with those guys over there. So they say it's an annual media rotation program, and I guess anybody who protests this thing will say, come on, we're just being fair. We're bringing in different reporters. That's good. It's diversity. Don't you like that? By the way, you're not supposed to do that. But anyway, I guess they could lean on that and say it's diversity. And then, of course, if the year comes to an end, they could just say, we decided it wasn't going to be annual after all. But you're going to have to wait a year to find that out. Anyway, just thought that was another interesting tidbit in that particular article. Let's jump back Something else I will bring up. I don't know why this came to mind, something that Greg said along the way, but maybe about reading newspapers. I want to note in passing of the print edition of the paper of record of my youth, the Star Ledger, the Newark, New Jersey-based Star Ledger. As I said, paper of record for most of northern New Jersey. Only competitor in northern New Jersey might have been it won the New York Times, but it wasn't a New Jersey-based paper, New York Times, but maybe the Bergen Record, possibly. If you went further south, you might be competing with the Asbury Park Press, and any further south than that, and you're talking about the Philadelphia Inquirer, or the Trentonian, I guess. But anyway, the Star Ledger was among the last ones standing, and Sunday's edition, I guess, was their last print edition. I mean, that was the paper of my youth where I'd go for the movie listings and the comics, and it was the only paper that arrived daily, I think, at our house. New York Times, I don't remember whether we did daily or not. Anyway, a storied newspaper prepares to print its own obituary, says the New York Times. The Star Ledger, New Jersey's longtime paper of record, will publish its final edition on Sunday and become online only thereafter. So they're not completely gone, but to measure the impact, I'll read you the leads of this article by Tracy Tully here. In its heyday, the Star Ledger, New Jersey's longtime paper of record, boasted the nation's largest state house bureau, an enviable circulation, and enough editorial clout to alter the trajectory of the region's defining infrastructure projects and environmental preservation efforts. Reporters were well paid, too bad about that, and often remained at the paper throughout the arc of their careers, imbuing the Ledger's news coverage with institutional memory and gravitas, even as its thick, zoned editions were crammed with mundane dispatches from the state's quilt of tiny towns and big cities. It was an extraordinarily, content-heavy and dense and serious paper. I mean, newspapers are closing left and right, but this is a fairly serious one, and you wouldn't know it if you weren't raised regionally. And even if you were, if you're reading Newsday out on Long Island, you may or may not ever have heard of the Star Ledger. It's not reaching into New York, but it was a big deal in New Jersey. On Sunday, the Ledger's nearly century-long run as New Jersey's dominant newspaper will come to an end when it prints its final edition and shifts to online-only format. Its editorial board will vanish, as will its clippable sports photos and pages of printed obituaries. Its sister publication, the Jersey Journal, one of the earliest holdings in the Newhouse Media family's now vast empire, will cease to exist in print or online, leaving Hudson County, New Jersey, which they note is a hotbed for political corruption, true, home base of Bob Menendez, in case you wanted an example, without a daily newspaper. 3 other affiliated papers, the Times of Trenton, the South Jersey Times, and the Hunterdon County Democrat, will stop printing and offer only digital news. The decision to shut the outlets coincides with a steep nationwide decline in newspaper readership that has contributed to the closure of more than 3,200 newspapers in the United States since 2005, according to the local news initiative at Northwestern's Medill School of Journalism. The Jersey Journal, which for 157 years has been based in New Jersey's most densely populated county, was selling just 2,600 papers a day. If you're curious about the decline of the most densely populated county of the most densely populated state in this country, 2,600 papers a day. You can't survive for long on that. But yeah, people are reading it online, so some of that will continue. So I don't know. I just wanted to make note of that as a major media event in a big media market. Not the big media market, but the most immediate adjacent big media market, but not big enough. All right, back to Pocket, if the computer will catch up and allow us to do this. No? Really? You're going to make me refresh this? All right. This is a big day for news. We can't have this kind of delay, computer. All right. What else have we got? available for you? Well, let's see. A lot of this stuff is things I put aside as from social media, and I have to open them one at a time in order to figure this out. But let me go to, I mentioned, well, should I read through the Wired thing? I guess so, but maybe let me begin with this. Since we've already mentioned it and we've told you, the weirdest part of all this, that there are a bunch of kids running all this. Let me go to a different take on this. This from Garrett Graff and his, I don't know if it's a Substack or not, but a Substack style offering, doomsdayscenario.co. Does that mean it's, is that a UK domain, right? For whatever reason. But anyway, Garrett Graff offers this newsletter, Doomsday Scenario. This entry, Musk's junta establishes him as head of government. He is, it says here in the subheader, imagining how we'd cover overseas what's happening to the U.S. right now. I thought this was an interesting take on explaining the seriousness of what's going on. Although, again, I think if you reduce it to, well, they hacked the servers and hoaxed the entire department and told them that they were all laid off and blocked the boss from getting online and being able to email those people and saying, no, the guys who said that don't have any authority, but and that's basically the bottom line of it. Anyway, Garrett covers it this way. I've long believed that the American media would be more clear-eyed about the rise and return of Donald Trump if it was happening overseas in a foreign country, where we're used to foreign correspondents writing with more incisive authority. Having watched with growing alarm the developments of the last 24 and 36 hours in Washington, and this was a February 1st piece, so it's already 2 days old, I thought I'd take a stab at just such a dispatch. Here's a story that should have been written this weekend under the title of because the next word is junta. I was saying Musk. Musk junta seizes key governmental offices. That's really it. They took over the airports. They rammed the ramparts. They did what they had to, whatever they had to do. And here's how it goes. What started Thursday as a political purge of the internal security services accelerated Friday into a full-blown coup. That's what it is. As elite technical units aligned with the media oligarch Elon Musk moved to seize key systems at the National Treasury, block outside access to federal personnel records, and take offline governmental communications networks. There are a number of agencies that if you go to their websites, their front page landing splash pages, they're just closed. With rapidity that has stunned even longtime political observers, forces loyal to Musk's junta have established him as the all but undisputed unelected head of government in just a matter of days, unwinding the longtime democracy's constitutional system and its proud nearly 250-year-old tradition of the rule of law. Having secured themselves in key ministries and in a building adjacent to the presidential office complex, Musk's forces have begun issuing directives to civil service workers and forcing the resignations of officials deemed insufficiently loyal, like the head of the country's aviation authority. The G7 country's newly installed president, a mid-level oligarch named Donald Trump, appeared amid Musk's moves to be increasingly merely a figurehead head of state. Trump is a convicted felon with a long record of family corruption and returned in power in late January after a 4-year interlude promising retribution and retaliation against foreign opponents and a domestic, quote, deep state. By the way, note that the big bad deep state was apparently defeated in the course of a weekend. It never existed. There weren't, we were always told that you would be just flat out killed for doing this stuff. But no, apparently not. Anyway, back to the article. He has been charged with attempting to overthrow the peaceful transition of power that had previously removed him from office in 2021, but loyalist elements in the judiciary successfully blocked his prosecution and incarceration, easing his return to power. Over the last 2 weeks, loyalist presidential factions and Musk-backed teams have launched sweeping, illegal, Stalin-esque purges of the national police forces and prosecutors, as well as offices known as inspectors general, who are typically responsible for investigating government corruption. While official numbers of the unprecedented ousters were kept secret, rumors swirled in the Capitol that the scores of career officials affected by the initial purges could rise into the thousands as political commissars continued to assess the backgrounds of members of the police forces. The mentally declining and aging head of state, who has long embraced conspiracist thinking, spent much of the week railing in bizarre public remarks against the country's oppressed racial and ethnic minorities, whom he blamed, without evidence, for causing a deadly plane crash across the river from the presidential mansion. Unfounded racist attacks on those minorities have been a key foundation of Trump's unpredicted rise to political power from a career as a real estate magnate and a reality TV host, and date back to his first announcement that he would seek the presidency in 2015, when he railed against, quote, rapists being sent into the country from its southern neighbor. In one of the first moves upon returning to the presidency, he mobilized far-right paramilitary security forces to begin raids at churches, schools, and workplaces to identify and remove racial minorities, including those who had long lived in harmony with the country's white Christian majority. He also immediately moved to release from prison some 1,500 supporters who had participated in his unsuccessful 2021 insurrection, including members of violent far-right militias who promptly upon release swore fealty to him in any future civil unrest. Elsewhere, even as he released violent criminals onto the streets, Trump, by fiat, pulled long-standing government security protection from former military and health officials he felt had betrayed him. Underscoring his apparent disconnection from reality, reports surfaced that the president had ordered military forces to unleash an environmental catastrophe and flood regions of a separatist province known as California that is led by a high-profile political opponent. The order underscored how the military, which had resisted Trump's unconstitutional power grabs in his first administration, was now led by a subservient defense minister, a favored TV personality with no experience in management, who faced an embarrassing series of allegations about his drunken behavior in the workplace. Foreign allies who had long aligned themselves with the United States on the international stage were unsettled by increasingly destabilizing nationalistic and imperialist rhetoric coming from the president's social media accounts, largely posted to a network owned and run by Trump himself, and worried in private conversations in Capitol embassies that he would mobilize the compliant military to fulfill heretofore unimaginable territorial ambitions that included seizing the country's northern neighbor, which shares the world's longest undefended border, and potentially colonizing Panama and Greenland. Both the country's defense minister, who has previously said he does not believe women should be allowed to serve in combat roles, and Trump's new interior minister, who appeared on national TV wearing the paramilitary uniform of the border security force central to Trump's political rise, spent much of their first days echoing and amplifying the president's hysteria about racial and ethnic minorities. They and other government officials also immediately canceled all official observances of religious and ethnic minority holidays and launched efforts to scrub official websites and prohibit educating workers or school children about those minorities' long, proud history in the country. Overnight, Friday, hours after journalists had gone home, the defense minister's office announced it would bar establishment independent media outlets from working out of the country's military headquarters and replace them with friendly right-wing media organs. The administration's propaganda minister also announced Friday, apparently with little preparation, that it would initiate an immediate, unexpected, and seemingly ill-considered trade war with the country's two primary economic partners, a move that, if implemented, would upend the national economy, disrupt supply chains, and accelerate the return of an inflationary crisis that has roiled domestic politics over the last 5 years and had just seemed to be returning to normal. Ironically, it was that very inflationary crisis and Trump's promise on the campaign trail to lower the price of eggs for the next break. And for some reason now the mouse is frozen, so I'm about a second late on that one. There's more, though. And not all that much of it, but you get the sense here of what's going on here. And this is very well constructed, and none of it is an exaggeration. This is probably how it would be covered if we saw it happening elsewhere. In fact, it's how we see it covered when it's happening in South Korea. And I don't know why it's not being reported this way. There are a couple of details in there that we haven't gotten to. You probably understood them, though, as I read them. Hi, everybody. It's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and Patreon.com, Patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, Patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Net Roots Radio. Let me continue with reading this piece. I thought very interesting, and just to remind you what we're reading, Garrett Graff in his Doomsday Scenario newsletter, writing an article describing the events of the first few weeks of the second Trump administration in the same kind of language we might expect to see if we were reporting on a foreign country going through the same difficulties. A couple of the things referenced along the way, in case you didn't recognize them as they pointed them out, right? There was this moment where he said Trump's new interior minister, who appeared on national TV wearing the paramilitary uniform of the Border Security Force, central to Trump's political rise, referring there to Kristi Noem, who is the DHS, Homeland Security secretary, not the Interior Secretary, but it's a label that works pretty well. But she's been doing nothing but television appearances in costume lately. I mentioned her as being some sort of like cosplay Barbie situation. It's very odd. But yeah, the first couple of shots I saw of her doing press conferences, she was wearing ice body armor and and ball cap and the whole get up and camouflage pants and whatnot, but at the same time, like, making sure that, I don't know whether she has like hair extensions or what, but the very fashion model look, heavily made up, and then the long tresses tumbling over her shoulder to, I guess that's supposed to soften the image of body armor, but which one are you playing here? But yeah, that's true. Wearing a paramilitary uniform. That's how we would describe things, I don't know, in the Gaddafi's Libya or something like that. Just making these appearances in paramilitary uniform. But over the weekend, she switched to civilian uniform, doing Sunday shows in a giant cowboy hat. But again, with the hair out front and over the shoulders, like in front and cascading down in front of her shoulders. Very weird, to say the least. I mean, people have long hair, that's fine, whatever, but I don't know, the hats are beginning to be a bit much. Anyway, so there was that one. Then there was also the mention of release of water and almost an environmental disaster. We haven't really gotten to that story yet, but again, that's in here in pockets somewhere too. After railing during the California fires that the government of California was, they needed to turn on the big water valve, and they have it, and it's giant, and it's bigger, 1,000 times bigger than a sink. And you just turn on the water, and then all the beautiful water will come down and put out the fires. after doing that, and then saying that the military invaded California and turned on the water. He went ahead and so now if you were looking for a kernel of truth in all of that, there was in fact a water release. And the first report that we read was that some federally controlled water systems had been closed for some routine maintenance and were turned back on again. But that didn't involve the military, so that didn't quite explain it. I think what he's thinking of here is the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers are often the ones that you will consult about these projects and their use and the release of water, because they're the ones who built the water systems, the dams, etc. And they know, A, how they work, and B, what happens if you open up the locks on the dams and let all the water out. How much water should you let out? What will be the damages? Why would you choose to do this? Why would you choose not to do this? Et cetera, et cetera. So that's the military part, I think, in his brain. I had the military invade them, but now he's ordered the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers to make this release. This is a second, maybe release. At any rate, this is reservoirs which essentially contain the irrigation water and drinking water that they would use ordinarily during the dry seasons later on in the year for most of California agriculture in its Central Valley. And it's water that's held in a reservoir on the other side of the mountains from the portion of the state where Los Angeles lies. There would be, in other words, no way to get this water from these reservoirs to Los Angeles. And at any rate, they don't need the water now. The fires are largely under control. It makes no sense. They ended up dumping out all this water, but they also, he was trying to order them to just throw the floodgates open entirely and just let all the water rush out. And the Army Corps of Engineers was reminding you the streams and rivers that handle this water when you release it will just erode and fall apart. There'll be mudslides everywhere, a huge environmental disaster. If you do things the way you want to do it, you gotta ratchet it back. But even if you ratchet it back, the water still goes to waste. And now, on top of the tariffs, on top of the throwing all the agricultural workers out of the country, on top of all of that, you're going to be facing a dry season during the growing year where there's a water shortage. Food prices will be going through the roof. By the way, how is the Dow Jones Industrial Average doing? Going down through the basement. It's bouncing back. So I don't know. We may have missed something in the interim while we've been busy with the show. Maybe Trump threatened people and told them they have to pay him. If they pay him bribes, I'll give you a pass on the tariffs. And those sectors are bouncing back. That's a possibility, because now it's just down 177 points. Looks to have bounced back past its opening. So I guess, I don't know, it still seems to note that it's down 177 or 0.4% for the day. So I'm not really sure why that's the case, but I guess the jump isn't all that much. Anyway, it'll fluctuate, I am sure. And if you know what's going on, what might have caused the rebound, feel free to drop me a line about that one. All right, back to Garrett Graff's exposition here about how he imagines this ought to be reported had we seen it in another country. I think we left off here by saying the administration's propaganda minister also announced Friday, and I guess this is White House spokesperson, apparently with little preparation, that it would initiate an immediate, unexpected, and seemingly ill-considered trade war with the country's two primary economic partners, a move that, if implemented, would upend the national economy, disrupt supply chains, and accelerate the return of an inflationary crisis that had roiled domestic politics over the last 5 years and had just seemed to be returning to normal. Ironically, it was that very inflationary crisis and Trump's promises on the campaign trail to lower the price of eggs that paved the way for his unforeseen election victory in November. The country's other business oligarchs have watched Musk's unexpected and rapid rise to power with trepidation, and leading media and technology companies who compete with Musk's extensive business empire, like Meta Amazon, Disney, Paramount, Apple, and OpenAI have quickly lined up to negotiate and pay bribes to the president that would allow their companies to operate unimpeded. Not really, of course. I mean, they are paying those bribes. They think they're allowing their companies to operate unimpeded, but they'll just be held up later on when he wants more cash from them. Initial payment terms ranged from $1 million gifts to the presidential inauguration up to $15 million and $25 million payments made by Disney and Meta to fund the construction of a presidential shrine. That would be the presidential library later on, right? The highest known payment was $40 million from Amazon, which was structured as a gift to the president's wife in exchange for the media company having the opportunity to film a hagiographic biopic. Have I got any of that pronunciation correct? It was unclear exactly what the deal terms of any of those bribes and payments unlocked and when subsequent tribute payments would be expected, although on Saturday Trump moved to fire and neuter government watchdogs that had long bedeviled the country's financial elite. Throughout the week's fast-moving seizure of power, one that seems increasingly irreversible by the hour, neither loyalist nor opposition paramilitary leaders raised meaningful objection to the new regime or the unraveling of the country's constitutional systems of checks and balances. A few members of the geriatric legislature body offered scattered social media posts condemning the move, but Parliament, where both houses are controlled by so-called MAGA members handpicked for their loyalty to the president, went home early for the weekend, even as Musk's forces spread through the Capitol streets. It was unclear what role, if any, Musk's forces would allow Parliament to have in the new governmental structure by the time it next returned to the National Assembly known as Capitol Hill. That's actually pretty well done, and unfortunately pretty close to where we actually sit. And how that's certainly how it's happening. It's just not how it's being covered in this country. It's a little weird. All right, let's see. A couple of other things that we have to go through here. And some of these things I'm going to have to click on and open and find out exactly what they are. All right, let's see. A Blue Sky post from Josh Marshall. What was of interest here? A tweet thread about what was going on in the departments over the weekend. Several conversations today. That would have been yesterday, Groundhog Day, but we can read it again today because Groundhog Day. Several conversations today with people in the key executive departments. And while the particulars are hard to pin down, my impression is that the Musk takeover stuff is considerably worse than is being presented in the press. Yes, probably true. Probably needed to be presented as Graf put it instead. By this, I don't necessarily mean the things that they've done yet, but the level of the level of what? Something they have already. Oh, the level of control, I guess. It's not in here. That they already have over key computer systems, payment systems, etc. And with the press picture, it's not the things aren't getting out. The stuff about the Treasury payments system and control over certain computer networks has been reported. It's more putting together the big picture about how different pieces fit together. There also seems to be a significant amount of downloading government data onto private servers, etc., totally outside of any cybersecurity regime. Additionally, it's unclear to the people inside whether the people doing these things actually work for the U.S. government, who they are, whether they're even American citizens. I think the 19-year-old is believed to be a Canadian citizen. Whether he has dual citizenship has yet to be determined. But he has, one, Canadian citizenship, and two, for some strange reason, apparently a lot of Russian relatives. Oh, well. Anyway, I'm sure that a 19-year-old boy will not be moved at all by the large number of attractive Russian women who suddenly want to be his friend. Anyway, they all seem to be Thiel and Musk protégés, and I've had multiple references to their refusing to identify themselves by anything but first name. The rationale given is that they could be doxxed, and they have been. One additional point, and to be clear, this latter stuff isn't from my reporting, just pieced together from other reports and what Musk is saying himself. They're into the ex-Treasury payment system and claiming that they've already found like $4 billion in, quote, savings in a day. This, again, might just be them declaring victory, or I don't know. It's important to know what this means, which we don't. This is what? Simple? I guess simply his Doge team reviewing the U.S. federal budget, law of the land, and deciding which parts aren't necessary. It sounds like they're saying they will unilaterally cut these funds with control over the check writing at Treasury. They're not saying the last part explicitly, but that's certainly the logic of what they're saying. Go and look at his tweets over the last 2 days. So a group of Musk proteges seem to be overruling the U.S. federal budget. Impoundment by the president is illegal. It's hard to think through the levels of illegality of having a group of people who don't even seem to be U.S. government employees doing it. And that about sums it up. I mean, that's kind of where we are and all that, both the graph piece and this more straightforward discussion of what's going on and the nature of the activity inside the buildings. The kids who have taken over are apparently sleeping there overnight, and this is something that Musk considers like good work ethic, etc. Although it's free room and board, and I don't know what the government efficiency people think of that. Apparently also, a lot of the interior spaces at some of these office buildings are being redesigned by other Musk proteges from his companies to include what they're calling resting rooms, which, you know, if a Democratic operation decided they were going to have resting rooms, and they probably do have something like that. But when, like, for instance, if a Democratic administration puts lactation rooms in there so that new moms can continue to work but can also feed their babies or pump breast milk while they're on the job so they can, you know, quickly get back to work with just a 15-minute break, which makes a certain amount of sense in terms of efficiency, that would be hopelessly woke, and we got to get rid of that and outrageous. But if Silicon Valley types want napping pods so that they can more efficiently work around the clock, allegedly, you know, somehow that's not portrayed as we're spending $20 million to put in a room where you don't work, that's outrageous. It would be immediately attacked by Republicans at the time. But now it's a private sector innovation being brought to government. We got to run government like a business, which means allowing people to camp out here rent free and nap during the working hours. You know, well, but they work 24 hours. Well, that's not my fault. That's your fault. It has also been interesting watching Elon Musk describe the phenomenon of the weekend and working hours as an opportunity to take over, and saying, you know, this is what's happening here is I came in to take over and I work 24/7. That's the kind of guy I am. This is just one of those things that, you know, if you're a multi-billionaire, centibillionaire, and your day is always about bending people to your will and making them execute your vision, and just for whatever reason money is piling up in your accounts even when your vision is crap, I guess if that were what was happening for me, I'd be a morning person too, I guess, right? A go-getter, an early riser. I'd be working 24/7 if my entire existence was about reshaping everything around me to my will. I guess I'd be pretty excited about that. Or if if my workday encompassed helping myself to the contents of the Treasury, I would likewise be more enthusiastic about it, I suppose. But at any rate, his idea is, well, you know, we're going to do this and they're going to camp out here and they're going to live here, and that's how we did it at Twitter, and that's fine. That's a private place. But you're talking about a federal facility that's just offering free room and board to people. How is that government efficiency? A room where you don't work, how is that government efficiency? Well, they need to nap. Well, get a hotel room and pay for it yourself. What's wrong with that as government efficiency? You can even rent the hotel room from the president. Why aren't you doing it? Well, anyway, it's disturbing, to say the least. What's this one? I got to open up individual Blue Sky tweets and see what's what. Oh, yes, right. This too. I have two things actually parked here from Steve Vladeck. The first, which actually came to me second, is the one I've got open here first. And it is a comment on the NTSB thing that the NTSB says it'll no longer email news outlets or reporters with notifications of upcoming press conferences. You got to sign up for X instead. Vladeck points out, hey, this will do wonders for the forthcoming argument that they'll make eventually that X isn't a state actor for purposes of violating the Constitution, right? So if you're giving out orders to government workers on X, or you're issuing threats against political enemies on X as the oligarch who took over the federal government, and you're being sued and you say this is an unconstitutional suppression of other people's civil rights or freedom of speech, etc. Or if other people say you're banning my account or blocking my account and you're now trampling on my free speech rights, which is, of course, something that the right wing has been complaining about for a long time, or had been complaining about for a long time before Musk bought the place. Oh, you're suppressing my speech. That's a free speech violation. It isn't, because it's not a state actor. Now, of course, you have less opportunity to rightfully claim not to be a state actor if you are also just coincidentally setting yourself up as the only official outlet for state communications. That's true, and a good observation from Steve Vladeck. There's another observation he made a couple of days ago, which I'll have to search around for, but it was an interesting quote, to be sure. I think it was during the initial fights about the OMB memos and the OPM memos, in which, let's see if I can find this thing. It's probably down around here. We'll see if this is the one that I was thinking of or not. Bear with me as I open these things up and try and find out. Nah, that ain't it either. That's too bad. The one I'm looking for, though, is Steve Vladeck pointing out, was it Steve Vladeck? Somebody was interviewing members of Congress about what did they think about all of this activity from last week, OPM memos and OMB memos declaring, various stories, various payments off limits and people being fired, et cetera, et cetera. And the impoundment, that was it, the impoundment of funds. And he was speaking to the new chairman of the House Appropriations Committee, and it escapes me which one of the MAGA chuds is now chair of the Appropriations Committee, who was saying, here it is. I think this is the one. Great. Okay. It'll just take me a few seconds to convince the computer to pull it up here. Right. Here we are. The reporting of Manu Raju is screenshotted here. The screenshot says that Manu talked to a bunch of House R's this AM, and this would have been sometime last week. January 28th is the date of Vladeck's comments on it. Talked to a bunch of House R's this AM in Doral about the White House moving to freeze federal aid. They were all down in Florida for the retreat, which, of course, the House Republican retreat was held at a Trump property in order to rent it from him. Many are defending Trump, including the chairman of the House Appropriations Committee, Tom Cole, who told me he doesn't, quote, have a problem, unquote, with the White House decision to pause the aid. I think that's probably what you ought to do when you're coming in as a new administration, he said. When asked about the legality of the White House directing agencies not to spend money appropriated by Congress, Cole called it a, quote, legitimate exercise of executive oversight, unquote, and noted that appropriations directed by Congress are, quote, not a law, unquote. And then more quotes from him. I'm not a lawyer. I can't pontificate on what's legal. But I suspect what's happening is what most Republicans would be supportive of, he said. Appropriations is not a law. It's a directive of Congress. The lawyers disagree about what's law and what's not. Right now, I think it's a legitimate exercise of executive oversight in areas they now control, he added. And Steve Vladeck, of course, just had to comment, as you probably did at home, just the checks notes chair of the House Appropriations Committee going on the record to say that appropriation statutes, quote, are not a law, unquote. The United States Congress, ladies and gentlemen, they, of course, are a law. The only one, if he was thinking of anything at all, the directive of Congress would be the congressional budget resolution. The budget resolution doesn't have the force of law. That's true. But appropriations bills, absolutely passed by both houses of Congress and either signed by the president or, I guess, left to collect dust for 10 days, but become the law. Nonetheless, they absolutely are the law. They are laws. And I guess this is a great reminder, right? Every time you wonder, I must not understand this thing correctly because the experts, the very people who do this, a chairman of the House Appropriations Committee says I'm wrong about it. I better check to see whether I just have been incorrectly assuming all along that appropriations bills become law. No, that's actually the way it was. I was right about that from the beginning. It's just that a person has risen to the chairmanship of the House Appropriations Committee with that little understanding of the basic nature of what he does, or the willingness to just completely lie about it. But I think it's a little bit of both. I remind you that very frequently you get authoritative sounding quotes from people who say the absolute wrong thing, but by virtue of their position, it is assumed that they know much, much, much more about it than any of you dummies out there in the general public. But in fact, the opposite is true. I've certainly experienced that on a number of fronts and a number of examples through the years. And here's one of the more egregious ones. Okay, I wanted to get that one onto the record, and we've missed that one for a while. So I'm glad we had an opportunity to do it. I got to refresh Pocket, 10, 15 times. Come on. You want to show me the ones I've saved. There's some real issues going on with Pocket these days. All right, let's see what other ones I've got handy. Again, I got to open some of these things and figure out what they are. And, a couple of them I'm learning either are now locked or I don't know what. But all right, let's see. I can't get through the Wired piece, and that may also be paywalled at some point. But I'll give you a link to it so that you can see if you happen to be a subscriber or find a gift subscription to it. You'll be able to read about the kids who are doing all of this and what they're up to. Let's see. And golly, I don't even know which ones to read to you now. I also there was at one point. Oh yeah, I'll have to return to this later on. Maybe this is a tomorrow thing. But I did get a gift subscription, not a subscription, but a gift pass to that Atlantic piece that Ann Applebaum wrote about her experience trying to report on the Greenland situation from inside Denmark and finding out that there was a real crisis going on. The Danish government viewed it as a huge crisis. All right, I guess we'll close out with just a little bit about that water situation from a technical perspective. We'll read just a minute or two we've got left here from we're going to be able to read it? Probably not. Okay. Lois Henry is the reporter here for the SJV waters at the San Joaquin Valley, perhaps. I don't know which. San something Valley, starting with a J. And Californians will know offhand exactly what we're talking about. Here we go. Just the technical explanation of what's going on. Trump's emergency water order responsible for water dump from Tulare. Is it Tulare? Tulare County lakes. The sudden announcement on Thursday by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers that Kaweah and Success Lakes would immediately begin dumping water was in response to President Trump's January 24th executive order mandating that federal officials exert all efforts to get more water to fight Southern California wildfires, the Army Corps confirmed Friday. And they had to confirm that because, as they pointed out, there's no way that water is going to end up in Southern California. Consistent with direction in the executive order on emergency measures to provide water resources in California, the Army Corps of Engineers is releasing water from Terminus Dam at Lake Kaweah and Schaefer Dam at Success Lake to ensure California has water available to respond to the wildfires, wrote Gene Pollack, a supervising public affairs specialist at the Army Corps' Washington, D.C. office. Indeed, President Trump boasted about the releases on, we got to get to the music here, his X page on Friday, posting a photo of a river and writing, photo of beautiful water flow that I just opened in California. Today, 1.6 billion gallons, and in 3 days, it'll be 5.2 billion gallons. Everybody should be happy about this long-fought victory. I only wish they listened to me 6 years ago. There would have been no fire. The water would have been gone 6 years ago. Tulare County water managers were perplexed and frustrated, noting both physical and legal barriers that make it virtually impossible for Tulare County river water to be used for Southern California fires. First, it would have to be pumped at great expense across the San Joaquin Valley to get to the California Aqueduct and then travel hundreds of miles south. Second, this isn't loose water free for the taking. Every drop belongs to someone, said Kiowa River Watermaster Victor Hernandez. The reservoir may belong to the federal government. The water, though, is ours. If someone's playing political games with this water, it's wrong. It was no game on Thursday when area water managers were given about an hour's notice that the Army Corps planned to release water up to channel capacity, the top amount that rivers can handle, immediately. The Army Corps later agreed to more measured releases, alleviating the mad scramble to alert first responders and have crews on standby in case riverbanks were breached and levees overtopped.
With David Waldman.
So there you have it. I'm in conflict with my outro here, but that's what happened in 2023 when the area flooded, and they were just going to artificially recreate that. We're talking about rivers that go from 55 cubic feet per second up to 987 cubic feet per second. That's near catastrophic capacity. We'll see you tomorrow.